Hello, today I'm here with William Wordsworth's poem Resolution and Independence. The poem is originally written in 1802 and published in 1807, so it is a kind of post lyrical ballad poem in which we have a mature face of William Wordsworth. While we are reading this poem, I ask you to notice 2 points. First, the language, second, the subject matter. The language of the poem follows somehow what William Wordsworth introduces in the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. There, Wordsworth says the language of a poem should be the language really spoken by men. So he thinks the poem should not follow maybe the different forms of ornamentations which were familiar and quite common in the neoclassical era. Also, in explaining the function of the language and a man really spoken to a man, William Wordsworth explains that he means the language of the emotions, not only the language of the words, so the language of the emotions. Wordsworth thinks the rural people who are in closer contact with nature are let's say closer to the pure forms of emotion, and he thinks a good poem is one which can communicate that kind of original essential emotions. Therefore, we have to notice this kind of language, the language of the feeling, which is conveyed through the poem, and also the language of the words William Wordsworth is using, especially that the poem is written in form of a dialogue. Of course, most of it is in dialogue, or it's a reported kind of a dialogue. And the second issue I ask you to notice is the subject matter. In his preface to Lyrical Ballads, Wordsworth clearly says that the subject matter of a poem can be anything, especially, let's say, the lower kind of subject matters, the subject matters which were not considered as proper and appropriate by previous poets, like the poets in the Renaissance or the poets living during the Neoclassical era. He thinks the lower the subject matter, the better the poem can be, and he really addresses this issue in his poetry. In this poem, he introduces the figure of a leech gatherer alongside his philosophy of thinking. And also, in his other poems, he introduces a mad woman, for example, or in Michael, a poem like Michael, he introduces a simple farmer. So these are the two important issues: the subject matter of the poem, while it is also philosophical and the poem is a descriptive, meditative one. William Wordsworth is describing that encounter with the leash gatherer, but at the same time, he's resolving a more important personal issue in his mind. And at the same time, we can focus on the way the poem is conveyed via the words and via the emotions of the poet. The poem begins with typical William Wordsworth. We have the description of nature, but we have to know while we are reading a romantic poem that when nature is there, it is a source of imagination. Well, it is a source for inspiration for the poet. Well, but at the same time, the poet is internalizing nature, and nature is just an excuse for the poet to talk about his emotions. Here, William Wordsworth is doing that. So he's not just describing nature, he's describing nature for a purpose. Let's see how. And while we are reading a romantic poem like one as which is written by William Wordsworth, we have to notice the incorporation of the subject and the object, the subject of the poet, and how that subject internalizes everything, and therefore the cooperation of what is private and what is outside, what is taken from the nature or other aspects of life. So there was a roaring in the wind all night. The poem begins with the presence of the nature. The rain came heavily and fell in floods. But now the sun is rising, calm and bright. So we have different types of climate, but now the sun is rising and everything is calm and bright. The birds are singing in the distant woods. Over his own sweet voice, the stock dove broods. The jay makes answer as the magpie chatters. You can listen to a magpie here. In all the air is filled with pleasant noise of waters. So let us listen to the noise of water too. Okay. So there are various types of musics and let's say auditory imageries and also visual imageries in a poem, and everything is typically just descriptive, but the poem is not supposed to remain at this same moment the whole time. I'm sorry. Oh, the magpie is singing. But I'm sorry. Stop it. All things that love the sun are out of doors. The sky rejoices in the morning's birth. And here we can see the unity of the whole universe or the unity of being. This is a kind of a romantic viewpoint that everything is connected to other things and we are parts of of a bigger whole. And here we have the same issue. We have the sun, we have the sky, we have animals. Both small and big things are connected. The grass is bright with raindrops, and the moors, the hare is running races and her mares. And we have a she hare here, and we have to know that maybe the hare is famous for its being very prolific and regenerative. Well, it's a sign of a marker, kind of a birth and rebirth. And with her feet, she from the plashy earth raises a mist that glittering in the sun runs with her all the way, wherever she does run. The same kind of unity. Everything is just linked to the other things, especially in nature, in which we can see this kind of perfection of the interrelationships and interconnectedness. Let her go, and we can continue. Till this moment in the poem, the poet was totally absent, or at least we could hear vaguely his voice. The I, the persona of the poet, was not present. And while we are reading a romantic poem, especially one written by William Wordsworth, we have to know that we are invited to identify the I or the persona in the poem with the figure of the poet, as William Wordsworth incorporates his memories into his poem. So the basic building block or the foundation of his poetry is his own experiences, his own memories. So we have the William Wordsworth here who speaks, I was a traveler then upon the moor. So everything was saying by William Wordsworth, and now he's acknowledging his presence in the poem. I saw the hare that raced about with joy. And now he says, I saw the hare that raced about with joy. The hare is the object, William Wordsworth, the I is the subject. And here we see how William Wordsworth is talking about the object from his own eyes. Everything is set us through the mind of the poet. And here we can see the same thing. That the hare is once going to the head or the mind of the poet, and then he's out with his words. I saw the hare that raced about with joy. I heard both visual and auditory. I heard the birds in distant waters roar, or heard them not as happy as a boy. William Wordsworth has famously stated in one poem that the child is the father of the man. He thinks childhood is a golden time. In your childhood, you're better connected to nature, you're better connected to the other world from which you're coming. So everything is greater, or let's say golder, or brighter than when you become an adult. And the boy or a child is also the reservoir of the memories later on going to become a poem. So he says, I'm an adult man and I'm not as happy as I was a boy. As a boy, William Wordsworth in his other poems states that, or as a child, you can be connected to the nature, you can be part of that nature. But here, as an adult, there is a distinction between the poet and the boy, as William Wordsworth is more enculturated, or he's now a thinking subject with the complicated procedures of the mind rather than a boy or a child who can simply connect to the world around. So The pleasant season did my heart employ. My old remembrances went from me wholly. William Wordsworth, as I told you, is dependent on his memories and his remembrances as a poet. And now I hear he's regretful about losing that kind of a contact. The pleasant season did my heart employ, my old remembrances went from me wholly, and all the ways of man so vain and melancholy. And when the remembrances go away from him, it's a sign that he cannot be creative, that he cannot imagine, and when his imagination is off, actually he cannot produce a poem. So he becomes melancholic. Everything from that kind of good vibe and colorful vibe of nature is now turned into the melancholy mood of the poet. And this is why that is why we call this poem a descriptive meditative one. He was describing something, but the let's say central aspect of the poem, the central part of the poem is the process of the meditation of the poem, the poet, the ponderings of him to resolve a personal issue and has connected or related to his feelings or state of the mind. But as it sometimes chances, from the mind of joys and minds that can no further go, as high as we have moused in delight, in our dejection you will sink as low. To me that morning did it happen so. So is dejected, and fears and fancies thick upon me came. That them sadness and blind thoughts I knew not, nor could name. I heard the skylark warbling in the sky. Again, he is repeating the memory, but he's saying that, okay, I cannot get the vibe. Why? Because when the poet is no more imaginative, or his creative faculty is not working, he cannot make that image something else to something else. He cannot produce a poem out of this imagery, so he's repeating it. And I bethought me of the playful hare, even such a happy child of earth am I. Even as these blissful creatures do I fare, far from the world I walk and from all care. But there may come another day to me, solitude, pain of heart, distress, and poverty. So, this is the source of the problem of the poet, that he fears sickness, distress, poverty to come to him. My whole life, I have lived in pleasant thought, as if life's business were a summer mood, as if all needful things would come unsought, to genial faith, still, rich, and genial, good. Genial is also a word repeated in Romantic poetry, as William Wordsworth is doing the same thing here. It means original, pure. But how can he the poet, expect that others should build for him, so for him, and do, and at his goal love him, who for himself will take no heed at all. So you cannot expect something from the people. The people cannot do everything for you. They are your audience, but when you are sick, they say, "Oh, poor him, he's sick," and then you would have no money, and then you would be poor, and life continues in a very bad way. So he's distressful for this kind of a situation, that if you're always happy, if you always make poems about daffodils dancing like the waves and the lake, then one day you would lose everything, your health, your money, and nobody would care about you. This mood of solitude is quite common in Romantic poetry as well. It is one of the other subject matters addressed in Romanticism. That the Romantic figure, while he's trying to address something about the society, maybe, or about the people, or about the humanity in general, he feels like a prophet to whom no one is listening. So he prefers solitude and loneliness, as William Wordsworth says, as I wandered lonely as a cloud. So this kind of loneliness and solitude as a romantic theme addressed here in this poem as well. I thought of Chatterton, the marvelous boy. Thomas Chatterton is somehow the one who inspired maybe the whole romantic movement. Chatterton wrote poems. He, as a poet, could not follow the rules of life, so people thought him mad, or people could not understand him. He wanted to enjoy nature, write poems, and do nothing. And you cannot do nothing. You have to do something to earn money, and this was not what Chatterton sought for. So what happened in the end was that Chatterton could not match himself with the society, and the society could not accept him, and he committed suicide. And William Wordsworth thinks that there is a Chatterton waiting for all of them. What happened to Chatterton, one way or another, would happen to them, and they will die in solitude and loneliness, not being understood. I thought of Chatterton, the marvelous boy, the sleepless soul that perished in his pride, of him who walked in glory and in joy, following his plough along the mountain side. By our own spirits are we deified. We poets in our youth began in gladness, but thereof came in the end despondency and madness. Now, whether it were by peculiar grace, a leading from above, a something given, yet it befell that in this lonely place, when I with these untoward thoughts had striven, beside a pole bare to the eye of heaven can be metaphor for the sun. I saw a man before me unawares, the oldest man has seemed that ever wore hairs, wore grey hairs. As a huge stone or something seen to lie, couched on the bald top of an eminence, wonder to all who do the same spy by what means it could thither came and whence, so that it seems a thing endued with sense. It is impossible for the man to be there because he's too old, but he is there. Like a sea beast crawled forth out on a shelf of rock or sand, proposes there to sun itself. So he sees in a very, very old man, motionless, standing somewhere. Such seemed this man, not all alive nor dead, nor all asleep in his extreme old age. His body was bent double, feet and head, coming together in life's pilgrimage, as if some dark constraint of pain or rage of sickness felt by him in times long past the more than human weight upon his frame had cast. So while William Wordsworth is thinking of his old age and compares his youth with the upcoming age, he sees an old man. Himself he propped, limbs, body, and pale face, upon a long grey staff of shaven wood, and still as I drew near, with gentle pace upon the margin of that Moorish blot, motionless as a cloud, the old man stood, that heareth not the loud winds when they call, and moveth altogether, if it moves at all. It doesn't move. At length, himself unsettling, he the pond steered with his staff, and fixedly did look upon the muddy water, which he conned, as if he had been reading in a book, and now a stranger's privilege I took, and drawing to his side to him did say, this morning gives us promise of a glorious day. So he starts the conversation. A gentle answer did the old make, in courteous speech, which first he slowly drew, and him with further words I thus bespake, what occupation do you there pursue? What is a lonesome place for one like you? Here, he replied, a flash of my surprise broke from the sable orbs of his yet vivid eyes. Huh, you're asking me what I'm doing here? This is life. I'm doing my life. His words came feebly from a feeble chest, but each in solemn order followed each, with something of a lofty utterance dressed, choice word, and measured phrase, above the reach of ordinary men, It is interesting that the man's language matches the language of the poet. Stateless speech, such as grave livers do in Scotland use. The grave livers were a group of people who were educated religiously, and they believed that they should not seek worldly matters, so they lived in the graves and they were ready for the other life. Religious men who give to God and man their dues. He told that to these waters he had come to gather leeches, being old and poor, employment hazardous and wearisome. And here Wordsworth is making a social comment too. And he had many hardships to endure from pond to pond, or roamed from moor to moor, housing with God's good help by choice or chance, and in this way he gained an honest maintenance. So he's a Lishkana, as we already knew. The old man still stood talking by my side, but now his voice to me was like a stream, and now we have the imagination of the poet activated. Scarce heard nor word from word could I divide, and the whole body of the man it seemed like one whom I had met with in a dream. Again, you see how the poet is making everything subjective, or like a man from some far region sent to give me human strength by apt admonishment. My former thoughts return, the fear that kills, and hope that is unwilling to be fed, cold pain and labor, and all fleshy ills, and mighty poets in their misery dread, perplexed and longing to be comforted. My question eagerly did I renew, who is it that you live, and what is it you do? He with a smile did then his words repeat, and said that, gathering leeches far and wide, they travel, steering thus about us feet the waters of the pools. There they abide. Once they could meet with them on every side, but they have dwindled long with slow decay. Sorry, yet still I preserve and find them where I may. So, because of life, and then an old man is working. Why not William Wordsworth? While he was talking thus, the lonely place, the old man's shape and speech all troubled me, and my mind's eye is a metaphor for the poet's imagination. I seem and we see how the poet is resolving that issue, that meditation side of the descriptive meditative poem. I seem to see him pace about the weary moors continually, wondering about long and silently. While I these thoughts within myself pursued, he having made a pause, the same discourse renewed. And the busy he is passing slowly, and the Moors uh, let him leave. So, okay, he left. And we can go to the next slide. And soon with this he other matter blended, cheerfully uttered, with demeanor kind that the poet can connect the two issues, the two incidents, but stately in the main, and when he ended, I could have laughed myself to scorn to find in that decrepit man so firm a mind. God, said I, he may help and stay secure. I think of the leech gatherer and the lonely moor. We see the leech gatherer as a kind of lure type of a human character in the human society, can teach William Wordsworth something. And this is how he thinks that the old man could communicate the emotions, or the purer kinds of the emotions, and teach him a lesson. So thank you very much for listening.